I'm Fonzo.
And I'm Eliza.
And we're the co-host of Grown, a podcast from the Moth that shows we're never fully grown.
Growing up feels like a phase that should end at some point, but does it ever really? Whether you're 16 or 26 or 86, you're gonna have to deal with family drama, your body, and the type of person you want to be. So why not put it all out in the open and go through it together?
Join us every other week to deal with cringe, culture, and the courageous efforts of people like you to get grown.
Start listening today. Follow Grown on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.
Hey, it's Anita. If you've been with us for a while, there's a name that probably sounds familiar to you. Omisade Burney-Scott. She was a guest in one of our very first Embodied episodes.
When I started in perimenopausal kind of phase of life, my mother was already deceased, and so I couldn't tap into her and say, hey, mommy, I'm pregnant and I'm 41. Is this what I should expect?
Since then, we've had Omi back every chance we could. She joined us to talk about menopause and shared her experience as a death doula. She also hosts her own podcast, The Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause. She's warm, wise, and has life experiences that intersect with almost everything we talk about on this show. Given all of that, we're thrilled to share she's going to be a recurring guest host for us. So without further delay, I'm turning things over to Omi.
My mother came to her marriage with my dad, Charlie, the father who raised my sister and I, a young widow with 2 small girls. Our father, William, passed away from cancer when I was 1, and my mother was pregnant with my younger sister. We already had 2 older sisters from my father, William's first marriage, and when Mommy married Daddy, we became little sisters of 2 big brothers. We had a pre-Brady Bunch Black blended family, and she was quick to correct people about my siblings from my father and stepdad. These are my children, she would say. These are your brothers and your sisters, no halves, no steps. This way of doing family was embedded into me as a child, and is what would shape my co-parenting relationships that I entered into with the fathers of my own children. This is Embodied. I'm Omisade Burney-Scott, guest host today and regular host of The Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause. People who are no longer married or romantically involved can and do co-parent. It isn't always easy because, well, we're human. We've got history and we're still trying to grow as individuals outside of who we used to be to each other. But more than that, much more. We center our children, the person we made, the ones who come to us by blood or by circumstance, and we show up. It's possible, it's real, and it's necessary. One person I've learned a lot about co-parenting from is Michael Scott, because we are in this journey together. Michael is a co-parent for my sons, Che and Taj. When I met Michael, Che was 8 or 9 years old, and that started off our parenting journey as Michael would become father to Che when we moved in together. While Michael and I were living together, Che's dad, Big Che, and Michael had a conversation about parenting, and it stuck with Michael ever since.
I want to say I initiated it, but I can't remember for sure. But I know it was important for me to have a conversation with Big Che because even though at the time I wasn't quote unquote a father yet, I knew that I was going to be heavily involved in raising Che. And I knew that just knowing that, the relationship I had with my dad, I wanted to be sure that Big Che was comfortable with me not taking his place, but being there as a co-parent, being there for Che, for some of those things that a father kind of looks forward to being involved with, teaching your kid how to drive, having birds and bees conversations, discipline stuff. I wanted to make sure that Big Che and I had an understanding, had a friendship, and that, I could talk to him, he could talk to me if anything, came up that may need addressing.
Our family has only grown since then. 3 years after we got married, Michael and I had our son Taj. Michael and I separated and divorced, and Michael had another daughter, Kylie, with his partner Catrice. But those changes have not stopped us from being family and from recognizing the importance of communication and giving ourselves grace as we navigate challenges.
Probably the biggest challenge is, or was at least, me thinking about, wow, Big Che, Omi, and I, we were successful at this co-parenting thing. And, if we could do it, we can do it with Kylie and Catrice, Kylie's mom, just like we did it with Big Che. And instead of letting that happen organically, I think I tried to make it happen. And the only resource I would say that helped me through that is my therapist. And talking to her. I mean, I'm a big proponent of therapy, Black folks. I realized that, I was trying to force this kumbaya when if I would have just let it happen naturally, it would have happened. But I think that it's much more the way I envisioned it early on. It's like that now, but because I stopped trying to make it happen.
Yeah. I think that I'm very clear that you wanted us all to see each other as family, and also wanted to make sure that all of the parents who were taking care of these kids saw each other fully and we were respecting each other. But I want to shift gears a little bit because I know you love being a daddy, and there are so many stereotypes out there about Black fatherhood. There's so many assumptions. You'll hear the question, is the father in the picture? And our answer for our family is yes and yes. And so I really would love for you to talk about what you love about being a dad to Che and Taj and Kylie. And do you think your experience of co-parenting has been shaped in any way, shape, or form by those external messages or stereotypes that you might have wanted to, disrupt?
Those external messages, I think I have disrupted them. Not in my mind, but in other people's minds. Because in my mind, I'm not doing anything out of the ordinary. I'm doing what feels right for me as a dad. And I hear a lot of, wow, you're such a great dad. You're an awesome dad. I mean, it is something to be applauded for, but not applauded for in the sense that, great job, Black guy, because not a whole lot of you guys are like that. That's what it feels like.
That's
sometimes.
What it feels like, and that's not true.
Right. I look at my friends that are my age who have kids, and we are all involved in our kids' lives. We are all taking them to events and all this stuff that, why wouldn't it be like that? In my mind, that's what dads do. I couldn't see it any other way. So I don't want a pat on the back.
The external pressures on parents are huge, especially if your family structure looks different than the norm. But what's funny is that there's so many different parenting structures that it's a wonder that there's even a normal. Michael and I have one version of a co-parenting story, and a father we heard from named A.J. Feeney Ruiz has another.
I have been a co-parent since about October 2019, when my friend Claire and I decided to try to have a baby as friends. And Rhett was born in August 2020 in the midst of a global pandemic. It's a bit rough sometimes. We created a parenting plan before Rhett was born as to how we would raise him. One of the things for me to be a co-parent was that I would be traveling for up to 6 months a year. So when I'm in Indianapolis, where we live, I have him 40 to 50% of the time, just depending on the weeks. And he gets 100% of my attention. So I get to be a full-time dad when I'm with him, but it's a full-time single dad. I was just returned from several days back in Indianapolis, where I was staying at the house of Claire and her fiance, and got to spend amazing time there. And you know what? We're a family. We make it work, and it's awesome. And if anybody's ever thinking about being a co-parent, just remember it takes some work and some planning, but you can do it.
Platonic co-parenting is growing in popularity. There are websites and apps to guide you in finding non-romantic parenting partners. But co-parenting isn't new. Indigenous, Black, and queer communities have long been raising kids outside of a nuclear family unit with larger networks of community and collective care. This is history that Zena Sharman learned as she started her own parenting journey. Early on, Zena never thought she'd be a parent, and then she fell in love.
I was in my late 30s and I fell in love with someone who was already in the process of making family with 3 other queer people. And that was really the entry point into this family formation for me.
Zena now shares the care of 3 children with her partner and another queer couple. In addition to parenting, she's a writer, LGBTQ+ health advocate, and author of the book, The Care We Dream Of. When we chatted, I could hear what a busy household she has. All 7 people living under one roof, including 5-week-old twins and a 4-year-old in tears over going to daycare. But they found a system to make sure that they can handle the responsibilities of the day as a unit.
We came up with our own family structure, and it was really a family formation. I think that we wanted to purposefully look different than I think what sometimes people assume about our family, which is 2 couples sharing custody, for example, maybe between 2 households. And we now all live together in one big house. And instead of the parenting roles being attached to 2 romantic couples, sort of a mom and a dad kind of role, we have at the core of our family unit is actually a really deep friendship between my partner, whose name is Scout, and one of my co-parents, whose name is Lyndon. And many years ago, they committed to co-parenting together as friends because they kept dating people who didn't want to have kids, and they really wanted to very deeply. So they became the lead parents in our family formation. And then my other co-parent and me came up with a title that I invented, which was we became vice parents. And basically what that means is, we kind of have slightly different roles in practice, with the lead parents shouldering more of the intense work of parenting, but with all of us really showing up in big ways, especially now because we have a 4-year-old and we also have 5-week-old twins. So this has been a really interesting moment of transition for our family.
How did things change in terms of your family structure and who's doing what when the twins came into the scene?
I think we're all getting used to saying we have 3 children and we're a family of 7. So that's definitely a really exciting and sometimes kind of mind-bending transition for all of us. And one of the things I think that's been amazingly helpful in our family is, we've got not 1, but 2 parents actually that are able to chest feed the babies. Mm-hmm. So one of my co-parents carried the twins, and then another co-parent actually was able to induce lactation to be able to also nurse the twins. So, I mention that because that's actually an immensely helpful thing in our family right now is we have our 2 lead parents that are really doing really intensive work of caring for infants, right? Mm-hmm. Which means, feeding and being up lots of the nights and just really that beautiful and hard hands-on work of caring for small babies. Mm-hmm. And so simultaneously, me and my other co-parent, I feel like we're just really running the household, and taking care of our 4-year-old and giving her as much security and stability as she can find in a time when her own family dynamic is shifting in really big ways after 4 years of being an only child. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I feel like it's a time where I think we're being tested, of course, because of the intensity of this moment. But I just keep feeling immensely grateful for the family structure that we have, especially having been raised by a single mom, and being really isolated from my family of origin in a lot of ways. I feel super grateful for the really robust and resilient kind of care webs that we're able to co-create together in our family.
Coordination for a family of 7 requires structure and intention. Zena and her family sit down together every Sunday to figure out meals, daycare pickup and drop-off, who's doing bedtime, and everything else they need to sort out and stay organized. And if disagreements arise, they are intentional about addressing that as well.
Something I notice is I feel like often the models I've seen for conflict resolution or dealing with conflict in relationships, they often, in my experience, really center either a romantic partnership or like how to have a difficult conversation with a coworker. And I don't feel like there's necessarily that set of practices and vocabulary that we can apply to other intimate relationships in our lives, our friendships, other aspects of the family formations that we have or that we co-create together. And I do feel like that conflict intimacy is a piece of work that's ongoing for us and our family, and some of that is just kind of being in the grind of the busyness of parenting all day, every day. And, one thing we have gotten into a practice of is just intentionally doing like around once a week, a feelings check-in, just among the adults and seeing how everybody's doing. And I think also trying to be more in an ongoing practice of giving each other honest feedback, but also giving each other a lot of grace, right? And so, when moments are hard or things don't go exactly how you might want it to, that doesn't necessarily always mean it has to be an opportunity to criticize or judge, but still really holding space to say, oh, hey, like that didn't feel good, or I don't like how this is going. Can we shift it? So I feel like that's an ongoing practice for us, but I think just creating intentional structures and practices around it, like those kinds of check-ins, has definitely made a difference. And I feel like the other piece is we just have to keep doing it, because that's how you get better, right? You kind of got to build it like a muscle.
Parenting is building and working a muscle. Strength and confidence comes with time and practice, which is something Michael has noticed as well.
I had no confidence as a parent until Che. And Che not even kind of, Che taught me how to be a dad. I saw that, wow, I'm not too bad at this dad thing. And I was honestly scared to be a dad. And we've had this conversation years ago. I didn't want kids. But now I couldn't imagine not having Taj, Che, and Kylie in my life. And again, I think that stepping in with Big Che as Che's co-parent let me know that, there's nothing to be afraid of. You can be a good parent.
Yeah, I agree. Zena, I want to bring you back in here. Your kids are still very young, but your 4-year-old's concept of family is already being shaped by the outside world, like daycare. So how do you think those outside influences about family will shape your parenting as all of your children get older, so they have the autonomy to feel confident about the way your family moves in the world in such a beautiful way?
Yeah, and it's a question we think about in different ways in our family, recognizing, of course, I think for all of us, there's the world building we can do in the spaces of our home or our intimate environments as families. And then there's what happens when our kids go out into the wider world and community. And, certainly we've had moments, even though our kid has gone to, I think, really good daycares that try to be inclusive. But we'll come home and say, well, all kids have a mom, and we'll have these conversations, and, it becomes an opening, right? To say, well, all kids grew in someone's body. And also, some kids have a mom, some kids don't. Some kids have 2 parents, some kids have more than 1 parent. And I think just really creating space to recognize, like, there's so many ways to create family and to be family to one another. And I think the reality is, so many of us in our own ways are living outside of the dominant norm of what a family can be. And so, I think in different kinds of ways, I want to be able to hopefully raise kids who have that capacity to feel solid in their sense of belonging in the family they're a part of, but that also can really be in recognition of the many ways people create family and relate to one another, and hopefully can grow up more equipped to practice interdependence and really show up in their communities, in ways where they don't just assume you only care for the people who you define as family, but hopefully can really be in that rich and broader web of relationships.
Michael, what are you most grateful for when it comes to your co-parenting relationships that you've made?
I think I'm most grateful for, all of us being able to keep in mind the most important piece of all this, which is the kids, and putting them first, making sure, again, all their needs are being met. And, just seeing how strong the three of them, how strong their bond is. Kylie loves Che to death and is so excited to see him. She's so excited when Taj comes back to the house after being at your place for a few days. So just seeing the relationship between the children and how it's grown, how the bond is there is one of the things that I'm most grateful for, and seeing how happy they are to have each other.
Zena, what advice would you give to folk who might be entering into an intentional co-parenting relationship?
Well, in terms of the gratitude, I want to echo something Michael touched into earlier, which is that feeling of being afraid to be a parent. For a long time, I did feel afraid to be a parent because I felt afraid of being needed too much. And what I feel so grateful for is that through circumstance and community and queerness and creativity, I found my way into this opportunity to be a parent and be part of a family structure that feels really enlivening and spacious and supportive to me. And for sure, parenting is really hard work, but just the opportunity to be in relationship with our children and get to know who they are and see who they're becoming and hopefully support them in that process of becoming. I feel so grateful for that all the time. And I think in terms of other folks looking for advice on what this can look like, part of the reason, with the consent of my family, that I wanted to tell our story a little bit more publicly was to offer one of myriad possibilities for doing family that weren't visible to me when I was younger and considering my own parenting journeys as a queer person. And so, I think part of it is just being able to think expansively about what might be doable, recognizing that that's going to look different depending on folks' circumstances and who they are and where they are. And I think also just to have a lot of conversation up front about your dreams, your visions, your values, the logistical stuff, and also just to be open to what unfolds. Because I think there's a big difference between the planning and the imagining and then the experience of becoming a parent. And so I think to be open to that unfolding and the ways it's gonna change you and shift what you might hope or imagine in practice.
When doing the work of parenting, it's important to have support and resources for finding that support. Someone I admire who's been thinking deeply about this for a long time is Trina Green Brown.
When I think about Black folks, ancestrally, culturally, we've always, adopted that African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. And so I think co-parenting is really expansive, and it's not just limited to two parents, right? It includes our kinship care. It includes our elders. It includes our community, our grandparents, our aunties, our uncles. And sometimes it goes beyond biological, right? It includes those play cousins and play aunties and godparents, and the ways that we, invite folks in to support us because we see community and we build community. And that also is the community that we often parent our children with. In my experience, I've had several co-parents. It's not just my child's, biological father.
Trina is the founder of Parenting for Liberation, a virtual community for Black people raising Black children. Parenting for Liberation provides a variety of resources to help Black parents heal, learn, and find community. They have a book and a podcast and also host regular workshops. Trina is fueled to do this work in part from her own experiences as a parent.
My co-parenting journey is that. It is still a journey. It has beautiful, beautiful moments where we can coalesce and compromise and negotiate, and all things are well. Mm-hmm. And there are times when it's hard and bumpy and we don't see eye to eye and we disagree. For me, the journey is the compromise, like letting go of what I think should happen because, this is my child. It becomes that. And I have to realize that this is our child, all of our child, and we all have something unique to contribute to this person's life, that I have to see the gifts that each of the co-parents bring and not only focus on what I think are the shortcomings and actually focus on and reframe and be like, this child is blessed by this person in these ways. It might be different than the ways that I bless and gift things to this child. Mm-hmm. And so how do I honor and just appreciate the gifts? And that has been the journey.
I think that sometimes we feel like if we make a decision around how we're going to be structured and things are going to be divided 50-50, 50-50 time, 50-50 finances, resources, then we're good, right? Because that's equal. But I don't think that that's equitable. So I would love to explore with you like how you have come to terms with or negotiated or committed to a more equitable kind of division of responsibilities inside your co-parenting relationship.
Oh, child, yes. It is not about equality and it's not about fairness. And I definitely had to learn about that because I'm over here counting and calculating how much I do and how many hours I spend and how much money I spend. And what I realized, especially in my work in social justice, I realized that there's a huge difference between equality, everybody getting the same, and equity, folks contributing based on what resources they have. And so based on what resources I have, I can contribute more things in one area. But that doesn't mean that this other person who may not have more, for example, they may have less financial resources, but maybe they have more time, or maybe they have more space to do more of the emotional labor, for example. And so I can't equate, well, if I give more dollars, that means more than you gave more time, right? And so I just think it's about honoring each person's contributions and also acknowledging that each person is giving from what resources they have. And our resources that we start with may not be equal. I think that's what, the systems want us to do is try to figure out a way for it to be 50-50. And in reality, we have to honor, where people arrive and what resources they have and honor their contributions based on what they have as opposed to comparing it to what I have.
Sure. And all of this happens while you're in motion, right? You're not figuring these things out in a separate container. They're happening while you're actually parenting your child, right? So the places of communication and figuring out equity happens while you're actively parenting and co-parenting. What can help parents do the work of building a healthy co-parenting relationship while they're actually doing the labor of parenting? These are the both and part of this work, right?
You're right. There is no hold on. Let me go figure this out. I don't know who's going to take care of this kid while I figure it out, but I'll be back. There is none of that. You have to be figuring it out. I do believe there's a lot of work that we have to do on ourselves as parents, right? Focusing on what does our self-care look like? What does our practices around our own mental health and wellness look like? How do we take care of our own emotional health so that we can be in these relationships? And I think that labor oftentimes gets kind of pushed because we want to be well, our kids come first. We have to focus on our children and we kind of put ourselves on the back burner. But I realized in my parenting journey that I can't show up whole for my child unless I'm doing my work as well.
I think the healing justice that you speak of makes me think about how we are in this space of continual learning and also unlearning because of our families of origin and also the assumptions or even messages we receive around what family is, what parenting is, or how you're supposed to parent. I'm curious about how do you encourage parents to embrace some of their own fears and to be open to changing some of the assumptions or even, mindsets they might have around family or parenting?
A lot of our work is rooted in how do we first see our fears, right? How do we actually kind of like look in the mirror, be vulnerable, and acknowledge that we are afraid? Afraid of, raising children, afraid of raising Black children in the society, afraid of getting it wrong, you know? And I think it's creating these safe spaces is one way that we do it. Our team, myself, we often lead with vulnerability ourselves to normalize that we are afraid and that we don't know all the answers. And I think it's like when we have these moments, such breakthroughs can happen because folks can release their cape that we try to wear as parents, that we superheroes and we know it all and we can fix it all. And actually, in our work working with Black parents, we also can spend some time locating or connecting those fears or doubts or worries to, either historical or ongoing traumas that we experience as Black people. Having that information at times allows parents to kind of let go some of those fears or some of those practices that are rooted in fear. And it creates an opportunity and a space for folks to actually define and redefine what does it mean to be a Black parent and what choices and decisions and values they want to fuel their parenting. And in our work, we try to choose liberation to be the fuel in our parenting, to really see our work of raising Black children as towards our children's liberation, but also for our collective liberation. So it is about that vulnerability and finding the roots of some of the fears.
Yeah.
And then once you find the roots of the fears, like how do we, like a gardener, uproot those fears, uproot those things, and till the soil and plant new seeds for the type of parents we want to be.
Parenting roots do go deep, from watching our own parents to the early experiences we have of interacting with children. But I'm excited about the cultivating Trina is doing and the space she holds for Black families while on her own learning journey. And she always is working on a new thing, like an innovation fund.
Y'all the first people to hear we're in the works around this innovation fund. We're going to be seeding folks innovative ideas and giving folks resources to try them out and experiment.
At the heart of co-parenting is the commitment to co-creating a healthy and loving environment for our children to grow and flourish. We learn from our children as we grow and deepen our practice of parenting. It's about intentional communication, respecting what each parent brings to the co-parenting relationship, doing the individual emotional and mental work, and learning and unlearning assumptions and old ways of thinking about what it means to co-parent. And I'll leave you with the insights from one other parent, Michelle Felder, founder of Parenting Pathfinders.
To me, co-parenting means raising children together while living the rest of your lives apart. The focus of your relationship is your children, and the goal of your relationship is to work together to manage all of the practical and emotional responsibilities that come along with raising a child. One of the most important lessons that I've learned through my experience of co-parenting is that just because I would do things one way, it doesn't mean that it's the right way. Co-parenting has been a master class in perspective taking, and it is okay that what I think is best and what my kid's other mom thinks is best, it's okay if it's different. The most important thing that I encourage all co-parents to do is to keep the focus on the kids. Center the kids in everything you do. Another piece of advice that I have for co-parents is to heal. I think that practicing mindfulness and going to therapy are incredibly helpful tools in the healing process. But find what works for you so that you're able to let go of the hurt of the past.
Embodied is a production of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC, a listener-supported station. If you want to lend your support to this podcast and WUNC's other shows on demand, consider a contribution at WUNC.org now. Incredible storytelling like you hear on Embodied is only possible because of listeners like you. This episode was produced by Kaya Finlay and edited by Amanda Magnus. Jenny Lawson is our sound engineer, and Quilla wrote our theme music. This show is supported by Weaver Street Market, a worker and consumer-owned cooperative selling organic and local food at 4 Triangle locations in North Carolina. Now featuring online shopping with next-day pickup. weaverstreetmarket.coop. If you enjoyed the show, share about it on social media and tag us with the handle Embodied WUNC on Twitter and Instagram. It helps new folks find the show, and it means so much. I'm Omisade Burney-Scott, sitting in for Anita Rao. If you need something to listen to next, you can check out my podcast, The Black Girl's Guide to Surviving Menopause. Until next time, thanks for listening to Embodied.